Ambassador John Carter stood at the massive viewing window of New Geneva Station and watched the alien ships drift past in the darkness of space. Each vessel represented a different species from the Galactic Council, and each one looked stranger than the last. The hegemony ships were long and sharp, like spears, while the ethereal, collective vessels seemed to be made of pure light that hurt to look at directly. Behind him, the diplomatic hall buzzed with the sounds of 12 different alien languages, being translated through universal communicators. Carter had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Earth had sent their best diplomat to represent humanity in what everyone hoped would be their formal entry into galactic civilization. The preliminary talks had gone well enough, but now came the real test. Today, the Council would present their final terms for human membership, and Carter would have to give them an answer that would shape the future of his entire species. He turned away from the window and walked back toward the diplomatic chamber, where his team was making final preparations. Deputy Ambassador Lisa Morgan was reviewing data on her tablet, while cultural specialist Ben Turner organized translation devices. They had worked together for months to understand every nuance of council politics and alien psychology. At least, that was what the aliens thought they were doing. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering designed to accommodate species with wildly different environmental needs. The aquatic depths delegation sat in pressurized water tanks, while the silicon-based cliques representatives rested on heated stone platforms. The insectoid hive clusters hung from the ceiling in web, like structures that made Carter's skin crawl every time he looked up. In the center of it all sat the Council Prime's throne, where Zeth Kalar of the hegemony would soon deliver what Carter suspected would be an ultimatum rather than a negotiation. Carter took his seat at the human delegation table and nodded to his team. They had rehearsed this moment countless times, but he still felt the weight of 47 human colony worlds resting on his shoulders. Every man, woman, and child in human space was counting on him to make the right choice today. The irony was that the choice had already been made months ago, back on Earth in the highest levels of government. Carter was just here to play his part in what might be the most important performance in human history. The great doors of the chamber hissed open, and Council Prime Zeth Kalar entered with all the ceremony his species could muster. The hegemony leader stood nearly 3 meters tall, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light and 4 arms that moved with unsettling coordination. His species had dominated the Council for over 1,000 years through a combination of military might and political cunning that had crushed dozens of younger civilizations. Today, he clearly expected to add humanity to that list. Zeth single quotes Kalar took his place on the throne and gestured for silence with all 4 arms. The chamber fell quiet, except for the background hum of life. Support systems working overtime to keep so many different species alive in one space. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never been seriously challenged. We have spent 3 years evaluating the human species and your potential contribution to galactic civilization. Zeth Kalar began. Your rapid expansion across 47 star systems in just 2 centuries demonstrates both impressive drive and dangerous instability. Your history of warfare and conquest concerns many council members who fear what such aggressive tendencies might mean for galactic peace. Carter listened without expression, while his mind cataloged every word for the recording devices hidden in his clothing. Earth needed to hear exactly how the Council viewed humanity and what they were really being offered. Around the chamber, other alien delegates nodded in agreement with their prime's assessment. The ethereal collective representative pulsed with approving colors, while the Merchant Guild of Travak clicked their mandibles in what Carter had learned was their version of applause. However, Zeth Kalar continued, the Council recognizes that humanity possesses certain useful qualities. Your industrial capacity is impressive for such a young species, and your adaptability could serve the greater galactic community well under proper guidance. Therefore, a council is prepared to offer humanity associate membership with the following conditions. Here it comes, Carter thought. 3 years of careful preparation had led to this moment, and he was finally going to hear what the council really wanted from his species. He activated the hidden quantum communicator in his jacket with a subtle gesture that looked like adjusting his collar. Whatever happened next, Earth needed to know immediately. First, humanity will accept council oversight of all colonial expansion beyond your current 47 systems. No new colonies will be established without explicit council approval and vote. Existing settlements must comply with council standards for resource extraction and population management. Second, all human military forces will be reduced to defensive levels only with offensive capabilities transferred to council peacekeeping forces. Third, human technological development will be guided by council science directives to ensure compatibility with galactic standards and prevent dangerous innovations. The chamber was completely silent now, as every alien delegate waited to see how humanity would respond to these terms. Carter could feel their expectations pressing down on him like a physical weight. They clearly believed they were offering humanity a generous deal by allowing them to exist at all under council protection. The alternative, they thought, was obvious extinction at the hands of superior galactic powers. Fourth, Zeth Kalar said with what might have been satisfaction, humanity will undergo behavioral modification protocols designed by council psychologists to reduce aggressive tendencies and improve social compatibility with established galactic norms. These protocols have proven effective with 7 previous species and will help integrate humans into civilized society. Carter felt his jaw tighten despite his diplomatic training. Behavioral modification was just a polite term for what Earth's history books called brainwashing. The Council wanted to fundamentally change what made humans human and turn them into compliant servants of an alien empire. Every instinct screamed at him to reject these terms immediately, but he forced himself to remain calm. His job was to listen and report, not to make decisions that belonged to his superiors back home. These terms are non-negotiable, Seth Kalar concluded. They represent the considered judgment of 12 ancient civilizations with millions of years of combined experience in galactic governance. Humanity is young and lacks the wisdom to understand what is truly in your best interests. The Council offers guidance, protection, and prosperity in exchange for submission to proven authority. You have 48 hours to provide your final answer. Carter stood slowly and looked around the chamber at the assembled alien delegates. Some watched him with curiosity, others with barely concealed contempt for his primitive species. None of them seemed to have any doubt about what his answer would be. After all, what choice did humanity really have when faced with the combined might of the galactic community? "We appreciate the Council's generous offer," Carter said in his most diplomatic tone. "Such important matters require careful consideration by my government. We request the full 48 hours to discuss these terms and will provide our final answer at that time." Zeth Kalar gestured dismissively with 2 of his arms. "Of course, even children must be allowed time to accept necessary medicine. We shall reconvene in 48 hours to welcome humanity into the galactic community." As the session ended and aliens began filing out of the chamber, Carter activated his hidden communicator one more time. A message he sent to Earth contained just 3 words, but they would set in motion events that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. Protocol 7. Initiate. The 48 hours passed faster than anyone expected. Ambassador John Carter had spent most of that time in his quarters aboard New Geneva Station, sending encrypted messages back to Earth and receiving equally coded responses. His team noticed that he seemed unusually calm for someone whose species faced either submission or destruction. Deputy Ambassador Lisa Morgan had asked him twice if he needed anything, but Carter simply smiled and told her everything was proceeding according to plan. When the diplomatic chamber reconvened, the alien delegates buzzed with anticipation. Council. Prime Zeth Kalar had spent the previous day meeting with various species representatives to discuss how best to integrate humanity into their existing power structure. The Merchant Guild of Travak was particularly excited about gaining access to human industrial techniques, while the hive clusters had already begun calculating how many human workers they could acquire for their mining operations. Carter entered the chamber carrying a single datapad and looking remarkably relaxed for someone about to surrender his species' independence. He nodded politely to the various alien delegates and took his seat at the human table where Ben Turner and Lisa Morgan waited with barely concealed tension. They had no idea what their ambassador planned to say, but they trusted his judgment completely. Zeth Kalar called the session to order with his usual dramatic gestures. The massive alien leader clearly expected this to be a simple formality where humanity would accept the inevitable and join the long list of species that had submitted to council authority. His forearms moved in what Carter had learned was a gesture of satisfaction as he prepared to welcome the newest members of galactic civilization. Ambassador Carter, Zeth Kalar, began, "The Council eagerly awaits humanity's response to our generous offer of membership. I trust your government has had sufficient time to recognize the wisdom of accepting our guidance and protection." Carter stood slowly and looked around the chamber at the assembled alien delegates. The ethereal collective representative pulsed with expectant colors while the Kulix delegation shifted on their heated stone platforms with what might have been anticipation. Every species in the room clearly believed they were about to witness humanity's surrender to superior galactic authority. "Thank you, Council Prime," Carter said in a clear, steady voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. "I have received detailed instructions from my government regarding your offer of council membership. After careful consideration of all terms and conditions presented 48 hours ago, Earth has reached a final decision." The chamber fell completely silent as every alien delegate leaned forward to hear humanity's capitulation. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to quiet as if the station itself was holding its breath. Zeth Kalar gestured for Carter to continue with what was clearly meant to be an encouraging smile from his alien features. "The government of Earth and all human colonial worlds respectfully decline membership in the Galactic Council," Carter announced. "We are withdrawing from all negotiations effective immediately and terminating all diplomatic contact with Council representatives." For several seconds, the chamber remained completely silent as the translator systems worked to convey Carter's words into 12 different alien languages. Then chaos erupted as delegates began shouting questions and protests in voices that ranged from harmonic vibrations to insectoid clicking. The Merchant Guild representative actually fell off his platform, while the hive clusters began buzzing so loudly that the universal translators gave up trying to process their communications. Zeth Kalar slammed all 4 of his arms down on his, thrown with enough force to crack the metal armrests. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder and gradually brought the other delegates back to order. His gray skin had darkened to almost black with what Carter recognized as extreme anger from his species. "This is impossible," Zeth Kalar roared. "You cannot simply reject council authority. No species has ever refused membership when offered. The protection and guidance of galactic civilization. You lack the military strength to survive alone, and your economy depends entirely on council trade routes." Carter remained standing calmly while alien delegates continued to mutter among themselves. In disbelief, the ethereal collective representative had shifted to angry red colors, while the aquatic depths delegation thrashed in their water tanks with obvious agitation. None of them seemed able to process the idea that a young species would voluntarily Choose independence over the security of Council membership. I understand your surprise, Carter replied. However, after reviewing your terms, my government has concluded that our civilizations are simply incompatible. Humanity values freedom and self-determination above security and prosperity. We appreciate the time you have invested in these negotiations, but we must respectfully withdraw. The Kulix delegation leader rose from his stone platform with movements that suggested barely controlled rage. His silicon-based anatomy glowed with heat as he spoke through the universal translator in a voice like grinding metal. You speak of freedom as if it has value compared to survival. Without Council protection, you will face pirates, raiders, and hostile empires that will destroy your pathetic colonies within years. We understand the risks, Carter said simply. Humanity chooses to face those challenges independently, rather than surrender our autonomy to achieve safety. Zeth-Kalar stood from his throne and towered over the human delegation with all four arms spread wide in a gesture of absolute authority. You are making a catastrophic mistake that will doom your entire species. The Council has maintained galactic peace for thousands of years through proven methods of governance and control. Young races cannot survive alone in the hostile environment of space. Carter began packing his datapad into his diplomatic case with unhurried movements that suggested complete confidence in his decision. Perhaps you are correct, Council Prime. Time will tell whether humanity can survive without Council guidance. However, we have made our choice, and we will live or die by the consequences. Around the chamber, alien delegates continued voicing their shock and disbelief at humanity's decision. The insectoid hive clusters were clicking frantically, while the Merchant Guild representatives calculated the economic losses from severed human trade relationships. None of them could understand why any species would choose uncertain independence over guaranteed security under Council protection. This session is concluded, Carter announced. My team and I will be departing New Geneva Station within the hour. We thank the Council for their time and wish all member species prosperity in their future endeavors. As Carter and his team walked toward the chamber exit, Zeth-Kalar called after them with a voice full of threat and promise. When your colonies burn and your people cry out for help, remember that you chose this path. The Council will not forget this insult to our authority. Carter paused at the doorway and looked back at the assembled alien delegates one final time. We will remember Council Prime. Goodbye. The moment the humans left the chamber, every alien delegate began talking at once. The ethereal collective demanded immediate economic sanctions, while the hive clusters suggested military intervention to force human compliance. Zeth-Kalar raised all four arms for silence, but his usual authority seemed diminished by humanity's unprecedented rejection. Meanwhile, throughout human space, a carefully coordinated plan that had been 3 years in the making finally began to unfold. Colony ships that had been secretly prepared for months launched toward unexplored regions of the galaxy, while defense platforms activated around every human world. Trade agreements with alien species were quietly terminated as human merchants began withdrawing from Council-controlled markets. Captain Lisa Morgan of the exploration vessel UES Defiance received her sealed orders as her fleet reached the edge of charted space. The message was simple, but would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. Continue expansion into Sectors 7 through 12. Avoid all contact with Council species. Establish forward bases and defensive positions. Humanity stands alone now. 3 months had passed since humanity's shocking withdrawal from the Galactic Council, and the effects were spreading through civilized space like ripples from a dropped stone. Council Prime Zeth-Kalar stood in his command center aboard the Hegemony. Flagship watching reports stream in from across their territory. What had started as confusion over human stubbornness was rapidly becoming something far more serious. The first signs of trouble came from the Merchant Guild of Travac, who reported massive disruptions in their trade networks. Human manufactured goods had disappeared from markets overnight, while shipping routes that depended on human transport vessels found themselves without cargo carriers. Guildmaster Vexstar had sent increasingly desperate messages to the Council demanding action as his species faced economic collapse without access to human industrial capacity. Even more disturbing were the reports from Council exploration fleets trying to expand into unexplored regions of the galaxy. Commander Thexul of the Klix Confederation had sent a priority message that made Zeth Kalar's forearms clench with frustration. 3 separate expansion attempts had encountered what the silicon-based officer described as impenetrable defensive barriers of unknown origin that blocked access to entire star systems. The ethereal collective had contributed their own troubling intelligence through their network of energy-based scouts. Their harmonic communications reported that human colonies had completely vanished from their expected locations, replaced by automated warning beacons that politely suggested Council vessels change course to avoid navigational hazards. When collective scouts tried to investigate further, they encountered defensive systems that made their ships flee in terror. Zeth Kalar activated the communication array and sent out a priority call to all Council intelligence services. If humanity thought they could simply disappear and avoid the consequences of rejecting galactic authority, they were about to learn otherwise. The Council had dealt with rebellious species before, and they had methods for bringing stubborn races back into line. The response came faster than expected, but not from the sources Zeth Kalar had contacted. Deep space monitoring stations reported that Council ships attempting to enter what had been neutral territory were being intercepted by vessels of unknown design. The encounters were brief and non-violent, but the message was clear. Someone was actively patrolling regions of space that the Council considered open for exploration. Analysis. Division Chief Corthan of the Quillix Confederation requested an emergency meeting to present findings that would shake the Council to its foundations. The silicon-based scientist had spent weeks studying the pattern of human disappearances, and his conclusions defied everything the Council thought they knew about the young upstart species. The humans did not simply withdraw, Corthan announced to the assembled Council intelligence officers. They implemented a coordinated strategic plan that has effectively cut us off from 60% of unexplored galactic territory. Every attempt to bypass their positions fails because they seem to anticipate our movements before we make them. The briefing room fell silent as alien officers tried to process this information. The Hive Cluster's representative buzzed with nervous energy, while the Depths delegation thrashed in their mobile water tanks. None of them could understand how a species that had seemed so primitive during negotiations could execute such a sophisticated operation. Zeth Kalar demanded more details, and Corthan activated a holographic display showing the galaxy with Council territory marked in blue and human controlled regions highlighted in red. The pattern that emerged was shocking in its implications. Humanity had not been randomly expanding for 2 centuries, as everyone believed. They had been systematically claiming strategic positions that controlled key hyperspace routes and resource-rich systems. Look at the positioning, Corthan continued. Every human colony sits at a crucial junction point for interstellar travel or guards access to valuable mining regions. They have created a barrier that prevents us from reaching the unexplored spiral arms where our next phase of expansion was planned to occur. The Merchant Guild representative clicked his mandibles in distress as he realized the full scope of human preparation. They were studying our trade routes during the negotiations. Every cultural exchange, every technical demonstration was actually reconnaissance gathering intelligence on our entire civilization. Council Security Chief Mordock of the Hegemony brought even more disturbing news. His agents had finally located Dr. Rachel Foster, a human xenobiologist who had remained behind on Council worlds to study alien cultures. When interrogated, she revealed information that made every Council officer question everything they thought they knew about humanity. "We were never interested in joining your empire," Foster had told her captors with calm satisfaction. The negotiations were cover for the most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history. While you were lecturing us about civilization, we were mapping every weakness in your entire power structure. The interrogation recordings played in the briefing room made Zeth Kalar's skin darken with rage. Foster explained how human cultural specialists had identified the fracture points between different Council species, while their technical teams analyzed alien military capabilities and economic dependencies. Every seemingly innocent question, during 3 years of talks, had been carefully designed to extract crucial information. "Your Ambassador Carter was not a diplomat," Foster continued in the recording. "He was a military intelligence officer with 30 years of experience in strategic planning. His entire team consisted of specialists whose job was to understand how your civilization really works, so we could either integrate safely or survive independently." The recording revealed that humanity had concluded within the first year of negotiations that the Council was essentially a sophisticated slavery system that used the promise of protection to control younger species. Human analysts had identified 12 different methods the Council used to maintain dominance, including economic dependency, technological suppression, and in extreme cases behavioral modification that amounted to species-wide brainwashing. "We realized that joining your Council would mean the end of everything that makes us human," Foster explained. "So we decided to prepare for the alternative. Every day you spent trying to convince us to surrender our freedom, we spent learning how to defend it." The implications hit every Council officer like a physical blow. Humanity had not been naive. Newcomers seeking guidance from advanced civilizations. They had been conducting a professional evaluation of galactic power structures and preparing for the possibility of conflict from the very beginning. The species that Council members had dismissed as primitive and aggressive had been playing a completely different game. Commander Steve Peterson of Human Deep Space Monitoring had been tracking Council communications for months, and his latest intercepts revealed growing desperation among alien leadership. Internal messages showed that several member species were beginning to blame each other for the human situation, while others questioned whether the Council's traditional methods could handle this unprecedented challenge. The Ethereal Collective was particularly frustrated because their energy-based scouts could not penetrate human defensive systems that seemed designed specifically to counter their capabilities. The hive clusters faced worker shortages without access to human industrial techniques, while the depths of Miral struggled with food production problems after losing human agricultural expertise. Most disturbing of all were reports that 3 minor Council species had begun secret communications with human representatives. The messages were heavily encrypted, but intelligence suggested these races were exploring the possibility of leaving Council protection to join whatever new alliance humanity was building in the unexplored regions. Zeth Kalar closed the briefing session with orders for increased surveillance of potentially disloyal species and immediate preparation for military action against human positions. If the Council could not bring humanity back through negotiation or economic pressure, then they would have to use the methods that had maintained galactic order for thousands of years. As Council officers dispersed to implement their leaders' commands, none of them noticed the small monitoring device that had been recording their every word. Captain Paul Anderson of Human Intelligence had spent months infiltrating Council security systems, and every detail of their response plans was already on its way to Earth. The galaxy was about to discover that underestimating humanity had been the greatest mistake in the Council's long history of conquest and control. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal, The Galactic Council was experiencing its worst crisis in over 1,000 years. What had begun as annoyance over a stubborn young species had transformed into a full-scale breakdown of the carefully maintained order that had kept 12 alien civilizations united under Council authority. Council Prime Zeth Kalar could no longer hide his desperation as reports of system failures poured in from across their territory. The Merchant Guild of Travak was the first to publicly demand action. Guild Master Vextar had arrived at Council headquarters with financial records showing catastrophic losses across every major trade network. Without human industrial capacity and transport services, 3 guild worlds faced complete economic collapse within months. The silicon-based merchants had grown so dependent on human manufacturing efficiency that their own production facilities could not meet basic needs. "We cannot survive without human technology," Vextar announced during an emergency council session. "Their industrial processes were 50% more efficient than anything we developed in 10,000 years of galactic commerce. Our entire economic model depended on access to human goods, and now we face shortages of everything from basic tools to starship components." The situation was even worse for smaller council species who had relied heavily on human expertise. The agricultural world of Kethmer reported crop failures after losing access to human farming techniques that had doubled their food production. 3 mining colonies faced abandonment because human extraction methods had made their operations profitable for the first time in centuries. More troubling were the reports from Council exploration fleets that continued to encounter mysterious barriers, blocking access to unexplored regions. Admiral Kexter of the Hegemony Navy had lost 6 scout ships to defensive systems that appeared faster than his vessels could react. The aliens manning those ships described technology that seemed decades ahead of anything in Council databases. "The humans are not simply hiding," Admiral Kexter reported to the War Council. "They are actively patrolling territory we considered neutral space and preventing any Council expansion beyond our current borders. Every route we attempt to use they have already fortified with defensive platforms that make passage impossible." The Council's intelligence services had finally pieced together the full scope of human deception, but the revelations only made their situation worse. Chief Analyst Morval of the Ethereal Collective presented evidence that humanity had been secretly recording every council meeting, every technical demonstration, and every casual conversation during 3 years of negotiations. They know the exact location of every military base, every resource depot, and every communication relay in council space, Morval explained through harmonic vibrations that conveyed deep concern. While we thought we were educating primitive newcomers, they were conducting the most sophisticated espionage operation in galactic history. The psychological impact on Council leadership was devastating. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia suddenly faced the reality that a race they considered barely civilized had outmaneuvered them completely. The Quilix Confederation's representatives spent days in heated stone chambers trying to process how their advanced analytical capabilities had failed to detect human intelligence gathering. President Karen Walsh's address to human colonies added insult to injury by broadcasting on frequencies the Council had believed were secure. Her message reached every corner of their territory, explaining humanity's decision in terms that made Council policies sound like the primitive barbarism of a dying empire. For 3 years, we listened to species who conquered the galaxy through slavery, genetic manipulation, and forced assimilation tell us we needed to be civilized, Walsh announced. They demanded we surrender our independence to join their empire of subjugation. They wanted to change our minds and hearts to make us compliant servants of alien masters. We chose freedom instead. The broadcast included detailed evidence of Council crimes against younger species, including the behavioral modification programs that had destroyed the cultural identity of 7 races over the past 1,000 years. Walsh presented recordings of council officers discussing how to break human resistance through economic pressure, psychological manipulation, and if necessary military conquest. These aliens who call themselves civilized plan to lobotomize our entire species to make us easier to control, Walsh continued. They view freedom as a disease that must be cured, and independence as rebellion that must be crushed. We reject their vision of galactic order and choose to build something better. The address had immediate effects throughout Council territory, as several member species began questioning whether they had made the right choice in accepting alien protection. The aquatic depths of Miral sent secret communications to human representatives asking about alternatives to Council membership, while 3 mining colonies in Hive Cluster territory requested information about joining the independent systems alliance that humanity was reportedly building. Admiral Jack Collins of the Human Defense Fleet demonstrated the true extent of human preparation when his ships encountered a Council peacekeeping force attempting to establish a blockade around former human trade routes. The engagement lasted less than an hour, but its outcome sent shockwaves through every military command in Council space. Collins' fleet of 12 vessels faced off against 47 Council ships representing 5 different species and their most advanced military technology. The aliens expected to overwhelm human forces through superior numbers and firepower that had conquered dozens of worlds over the centuries. Instead, they found themselves completely outclassed by opponents who anticipated every tactical move before it was made. Human ships moved with precision that suggested perfect coordination, while their weapon systems destroyed Council vessels faster than alien commanders could track the attacks. The engagement ended when Collins ordered the capture rather than destruction of the remaining enemy fleet, leaving Council forces stunned and humiliated by their total defeat. We could have destroyed every ship, Collins announced on open channels that every Council intelligence service monitored. Instead, we choose to demonstrate that humanity does not seek conquest through violence. We want only to be left alone to build our own future free from alien interference. The captured Council officers provided even more disturbing intelligence when they were questioned by human specialists. Captain Lisa Morgan of the interrogation team discovered that Council military doctrine had not changed significantly in over 500 years because no species had ever challenged their authority successfully enough to force adaptation. They became lazy and arrogant, Morgan reported to Earth Command. Their entire military structure depends on overwhelming primitive opponents with superior technology and numbers. They have no experience fighting enemies who match or exceed their capabilities because they always destroyed such threats before they could develop. The political ramifications of Collins' victory spread rapidly through Council territory as member species realized their protection was not as absolute as they had believed. The Ethereal Collective began restricting their energy scouts to avoid encounters with human patrols, while the Merchant Guild quietly approached neutral parties about opening communication channels with human representatives. Most shocking of all were the intercepted communications revealing that Council intelligence had vastly underestimated human territorial expansion. Deep space monitoring stations reported human ships operating in regions supposedly beyond their reach, while automated beacons warned Council vessels away from star systems that had never appeared on any galactic charts. The Zephyrian Republic sent a desperate message to Council headquarters reporting that human diplomatic teams had approached their leadership with offers of genuine partnership rather than the tributary relationship they endured under Council protection. Similar contacts were reported by 6 other species who seemed increasingly interested in alternatives to alien domination. Council Prime Zeph Kalar called an emergency session to address the growing crisis, but his usual authority seemed diminished by the series of failures that had shaken alien confidence in their leadership. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 species tried to understand how their supposedly invincible civilization was being systematically dismantled by opponents they had dismissed as primitive children. We face an unprecedented challenge to galactic order, Zeth Kalar announced with less confidence than usual. Humanity has rejected the wisdom of superior civilizations and chosen the path of chaos and conflict. We must decide whether to continue diplomatic efforts or resort to the final solution that has maintained our authority for thousands of years. The final solution meant total war against human civilization using the combined military might of the entire council. It was a step that had been taken only 3 times in galactic history, and each time had resulted in the complete extinction of the target species. As council representatives debated this ultimate option, none of them realized that human intelligence agents were recording every word of their deliberations. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal from negotiations, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Council Prime Zeth Kalar stood in the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful alliance in known space and wondered how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The final desperate gamble to restore galactic order through military force had failed spectacularly, and now the Council faced complete collapse as member species abandoned their ancient alliance in favor of human partnership. The breaking point had come when Zeth Kalar assembled the largest military fleet in galactic history to crush human resistance once and for all. Over 3,000 ships, representing every council species, had gathered at the Kepler Nexus, a critical hyperspace junction that humanity controlled. The aliens believed their overwhelming numerical advantage would finally force the stubborn humans to accept council authority or face extinction. Admiral Ben Turner of the Human Defense Fleet had been waiting for them with just 400 ships, but his confident broadcast to Earth suggested he welcomed the opportunity to demonstrate human capabilities. The battle that followed became legendary throughout the galaxy, not for its violence, but for the complete tactical superiority that humanity displayed against supposedly advanced opponents. Turner used strategies that combined human unpredictability with technology that the Council had never encountered in their 1,000 years of conquest. His ships moved in coordinated patterns that confused alien commanders while their weapons systems disabled rather than destroyed enemy vessels with precision that seemed impossible. The engagement lasted 6 hours and ended with the capture of over 2,000 Council ships and the complete surrender of the rest. "We could have destroyed your entire fleet," Turner announced on open channels as captured alien crews were processed by human boarding parties. "Instead, we choose to demonstrate that freedom produces better results than tyranny. Your crews will be treated well and return to your worlds with a message about the benefits of cooperation over conquest." The psychological impact of this defeat shattered Council authority permanently. Species that had accepted alien domination for centuries suddenly realized their protectors were not invincible and began questioning everything they had been taught about galactic civilization. The Zephyrian Republic was the first to formally withdraw from Council membership after Captain Paul Anderson's diplomatic mission offered them genuine partnership in the Independent Systems Alliance. Anderson's negotiations with Zephyrian leaders revealed the sophisticated approach humanity was taking to galactic politics. Unlike the Council, which demanded tribute and submission from member species, the humans offered technological assistance, industrial partnerships, and mutual defense. Agreements that respected each race's independence and cultural identity. "We believe that free peoples working together accomplish more than slaves serving masters," Anderson explained to the Zephyrian Parliament. "Humanity offers alliance, not domination. We seek partners, not servants. Join us and keep your freedom, while gaining access to resources and protection that come from voluntary cooperation." The Zephyrian decision to join humanity triggered a cascade of defections that the Council could not stop. The aquatic depths of Miral followed within weeks. After Commander Helen Brooks demonstrated underwater cities that made Council aquaculture look primitive by comparison. 3 mining worlds abandoned the hive clusters when human engineers showed them extraction techniques that doubled production, while requiring half the workforce. Each species that joined the Independent Systems Alliance brought reports of Council oppression that shocked even human observers who had studied alien methods for years. The behavioral modification programs were worse than anyone imagined, with entire populations having their personalities altered to make them more compliant. Resource extraction quotas stripped worlds bare, while economic policies kept member species dependent on Council technology and unable to develop their own capabilities. Dr. Rachel Foster, who had finally been released from Council custody, provided testimony that revealed the full extent of alien crimes against developing civilizations. Her detailed reports documented how the Council identified promising young species and, systematically, destroyed their potential for independent growth through manipulation, psychological pressure, and, when necessary, military intervention. They were not protecting the galaxy, Foster explained in her broadcasts to newly liberated worlds. They were maintaining a prison where only a few species at the top enjoyed freedom while everyone else existed to serve their interests. The Council claimed to offer civilization, but what they really provided was sophisticated slavery. The collapse of Council authority created opportunities that humanity was prepared to exploit through careful planning and genuine partnership with former alien subjects. Captain Lisa Morgan led colonization efforts that established joint settlements where humans and aliens worked together as equals rather than masters and servants. These mixed communities became showcases for the benefits of cooperation over domination. Meanwhile, the remaining Council leadership struggled to maintain control over their shrinking territory as internal rebellions broke out on 12 different worlds. The ethereal collective faced energy storms created by their own oppressed underclass, while the Clix Confederation discovered that their silicon-based logic could not solve problems created by centuries of arrogant assumptions about their own superiority. The Merchant Guild of Travak attempted to negotiate separate peace agreements with human representatives, but found that humanity remembered every instance of alien contempt during the original negotiations. Guildmaster Vextar learned that freedom came with consequences when his requests for resumed trade were politely declined until his species demonstrated genuine commitment to respecting the rights of other races. President Karen Walsh addressed the transformed galaxy from Earth with a message that reached every corner of known space, including the fragments of Council territory, where alien populations listened in secret. Her words carried the authority of a species that had proven freedom worked better than tyranny through actions rather than empty promises. 1 year ago, the Galactic Council demanded that humanity surrender our independence to join their empire of oppression. Walsh announced, they threatened us with destruction if we refused to accept behavioral modification that would have erased everything that makes us human. Today, their empire crumbles while free peoples work together to build something better. The broadcast included footage of thriving mixed settlements where humans and former Council subjects collaborated on projects that benefited everyone involved. Agricultural worlds produced more food than ever before, while mining operations extracted resources efficiently without destroying planetary environments. Most importantly, every species retained their cultural identity and freedom to make their own choices. This is what cooperation looks like when based on respect rather than fear. Walsh continued, we invite any species still trapped under Council authority to join us in building a galaxy where freedom and dignity are not privileges granted by alien masters, but rights that belong to every sentient being. The final blow to Council power came when Ambassador John Carter returned to New Geneva Station for one last meeting with the aliens who had demanded human submission just 1 year earlier. The magnificent diplomatic facility was nearly empty now, with most species having withdrawn their representatives to focus on internal problems created by the collapse of their authoritarian system. Carter found Zeth Kalar alone in the diplomatic chamber that had once hosted the representatives of 12 powerful civilizations. The massive alien leader looked smaller somehow, as if the failure of his life's work had physically diminished him. His 4 arms moved with none of their former authority as he struggled to understand how everything had gone wrong. "You have destroyed galactic civilization," Zeth Kalar accused with less conviction than his words suggested. "Chaos will consume the galaxy now that Council authority has been rejected. Without our guidance and protection, younger species will war among themselves until nothing remains." Carter smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose careful planning had achieved exactly the intended results. "Council Prime, we have not destroyed civilization. We have liberated it from your control. The galaxy is learning that freedom works better than slavery, and cooperation accomplishes more than conquest." The human ambassador activated a communication device that connected him to the Independent Systems Alliance headquarters, where representatives from 47 different species were working together to establish new trade agreements, defense pacts, and cultural exchange programs. Their voices filled the empty chamber with the sounds of genuine cooperation, replacing the forced submission that had characterized council meetings. "When you are ready to abandon empire and join the community of free peoples, we will welcome you," Carter concluded. "Until then, humanity and our allies will continue building a galaxy where every species has the right to determine their own destiny." As Carter left New Geneva Station for the final time, the camera pulled back to show the vast emptiness of space where Council authority had once dominated everything.